Hey guys, how's everybody doing? It's Lou. I'm back today for another vinyl finds video. I've got, I think, about 12 albums today to go through, and it's a combination of online finds and record store purchases, okay? So the first one we have, Eric Burdon and the Animals, and this is Eric Burdon with the new Animals, I suppose. So the original band had broken up, and he formed the new Animals, and I think this is the second album he did with the new group. This is called Winds of Change, and I guess around that period, late 60s, I think this is from 67, where a lot of bands were now moving in a psych rock type of direction, and you know, the Animals were the same. So this is a pretty good album. I don't like it as much as I like the original Animals string of albums, but this is still pretty good. And I guess the bigger songs from here, Winds of Change, San Francisco Nights, I think it is. And there's also a version of Rolling Stones' Painted Black. So Winds of Change, Eric Burdon and the Animals. Then one of my favorite bands, a release from this year, but an album, a live album that was recorded back in 1968. We have The Who, live at the Fillmore East to be exact, 1968. This is a triple LP set. In 68, The Who were touring for their second album, a quick one. I think was called Happy Jack in the US. They do a few songs from that on here. Like I said, triple LP. It sounds very similar to Live at Leeds and the Isle of Wight albums, that heavier. The Who are starting to sound a little bit heavier at that time, and has some songs in common with some of those releases. So things like Summertime Blues, Fortune Teller, Tattoo, which were on those releases. So from a quick one, they were touring. Actually, were they touring a quick one, or were they touring The Who Sell Out? Because Tattoo from The Who Sell Out is on here. Some older songs like I Can't Explain. They do Happy Jack, which wasn't on the quick one album, but was on the US version entitled Happy Jack. And the third LP on this is literally My Generation. My Generation Part 1 on Side 5 and My Generation Part 2 on Side 6. A mammoth track, fantastic Who song, but I don't think it needs to, I don't think we need this version to be this long. It's a little overdone and a little lengthy, if I admit. But still, this is a fantastic release, and if you're a Who fan, I would definitely recommend this. Here's the back as well. Okay, that came out earlier this year. I think that was available in bootleg form for quite some time, because a lot of comments that I'd read from Who fans, they already had a copy of that. But the sound quality is pretty good on that. I'm pretty happy with that. And related to The Who, a new release from this year. I don't know how many people thought we would see this, but we have Roger Daltrey and his solo album. This just came out on June 1st. Roger Daltrey is 74 years old, and the guy sings amazing on this. In the last several years, I caught The Who on their Quadrophenia tour a few years ago, and he sounded fantastic on that. He also sounded great on the album that he did prior to this with Wilco Johnson. That was a fantastic album, and he sounds amazing on this. I am a little disappointed by this, if I'm honest. The lead track on this, which was the title track, As Long As I... What is this called? As Long As I Have You. That lead track was fantastic. It's a cover of a Northern Soul song from the 60s. And that is easily the best song on here. Fantastic, fantastic song. And as you'd expect, most of the songs on here are covers because Roger Waters isn't really known as a songwriter. Obviously in The Who, Pete Townsend wrote the bulk of the songs. But his vocals on this are fantastic. And no 74-year-old should be sounding this good, honestly. So like I said, most of these songs are covers, besides that Northern Soul song. I'm unfamiliar with the covers, but artists such as Stephen Stills, Stevie Wonder, Nick Cave, so it's a variety of sources. And Roger does make these songs his own, and this is a very good album. I mean, I'd probably rate this maybe 3.5 stars or 7 out of 5 or 7 stars out of 10, if I'm honest. Roger Daltrey, As Long As I Have You. Then an album that I've had on CD for the longest time, and I finally decided to get it on vinyl. We have Jefferson Airplane, After Bathing at Baxter's. And even though I've had this record for quite some time, I'm not that familiar with it, to be honest with you. When I feel like playing Jefferson Airplane, I usually reach for Surrealistic Pillow, which is the album prior to this. So Surrealistic Pillow was their second album in '67, their second album overall, released in '67. And then this album also came out later in that same year in '67, so their third album. So I either go for that Surrealistic Pillow, or Volunteers is another album that I play a lot. I don't play this one quite a lot, but I felt like I needed it to fill out the collection for Jefferson Airplane. And lately, I've been showing quite a bit of Hawkwind. I've been trying to collect as much Hawkwind as I can, especially from their early to mid 70s period, especially the period with Lemmy and the band. And probably my most favorite album of Hawkwind is their live album, Space Ritual. So this album was recorded, I guess, in late. Just give me a sec. Sorry about that. So as I was saying, Hawkwind, Space Ritual, this album was recorded from shows in December of 1972 and then released in 1973. I've had this album in an expanded form on double CD for many years, and it is my favorite Hawkwind album. Probably their most well-known album, I would say, and Lemmy is on this album. And yeah, what can you say? If you're a Hawkwind fan, you absolutely need this album, or you probably know this album fairly well. What the hell happened here? All right, Hawkwind. I think that was the slip mat from my my turntable got in there somehow. Anyway, so continuing with Hawkwind, from 1977. We have, and I always get the title of this wrong, Quark, Strangeness, and Charm, 1977. Probably the last really good Hawkwind album. Lemmy was already gone and had formed Motorhead. But this is still a pretty good album. And I guess the one constant thing with Hawkwind is Dave Brock, and he's fantastic on this. So recently I've actually gone and separated some of the genres in my record collection, which is a huge task. I used to just have everything A to Z, and I started out with jazz, and then I moved on to reggae and then soul. And in doing that, I started playing some of my reggae albums, which I hadn't played in quite a while. And one of my favorite reggae artists is this guy, Burning Spear, and this is Burning Spear's album Garvey's Ghost. And I guess Burning Spear's most famous or well-known album is his 1975 album called Marcus Garvey. And as this name suggests, Garvey's Ghost is a dub version of Marcus Garvey. So Marcus Garvey released in 75, this dub version, Garvey's Ghost, released in 76. And I think you can see down there, it lets you know that it's a dub album. So from 1976. So all the usual, effects on here, and, the vocals are really quite minimal on here, and it's mainly a lot of the rhythms, and fantastic. If you're a fan of, I had this album as well in a two for CD along with Marcus Garvey, so I was already familiar with what I was getting here. Garvey's Ghost. Then another album from 1976, we have the Flaming Groovies, Shake Some Action. I'm not that familiar with the Flaming Groovies. I really only know two albums, and I guess they're their two most popular albums. Their album from 1971, Teenage Head, and then this album from 1976, Shake Some Action. And I've read some descriptions of people's reviews for those two albums, and I have to agree with what I've read. The 1971 album, Teenage Head, is described as very much a sort of a Stonesy kind of album, Rolling Stones, and this 1976 album, which is without their lead vocalist, I guess the guitar player took over on vocals, is described more as a Beatles type of album. So the 71 album Stones, then the 76 album Beatles, and they're both great albums, but I definitely prefer this album. The title track on this, Shake Some Action, is just fantastic. Then from 1979, we have Thin Lizzy, A Black Rose. And I guess this album from Thin Lizzy is mostly known for having Gary Moore on guitar. I guess Gary Moore had a couple of different stints in the band. I don't really know his recording output with the band. Obviously I know he's on this album. And this gets Thin Lizzy back to the twin guitar attack, because they had lost Brian Robertson from the band, and on the previous album, Bad Reputation, they were down to a trio, but with the addition of Gary Moore, they're back up to 4 members in the band and the twin guitar attack. Excellent Thin Lizzy from 79. And then we have a bootleg recording of the Ramones from a concert in Buffalo in February of 1979. I had read some reviews on this that said even though it was a bootleg release, the quality was quite good. I don't really agree with that. I think the quality is not really that good. The performance sounds great, but again, I don't think the quality is great. It was fairly cheap though. I think I paid like 18 plus shipping for this. And in true Ramones fashion, this is a single disc live album. They jammed, I think, 23 songs on here. So you know what you're getting with the Ramones live. Then a band from the 90s, they made 5 albums. They were one of my favorite bands from the 90s, although I never saw this band live. I'm not really sure why. And I've shown them before, and I've shown solo albums by their lead singer. It's the band Pavement. And this was Pavement's album from 1999. It was actually their last album together, Terror Twilight. And when you look at ratings for Pavement, their last album is actually rated the lowest out of any of their albums. So I guess it's the fans' least favorite. I still think it's a great album. It has... I guess the big well-known song off of this, Big for Pavement, is Spit on a Stranger. And I'm going to probably try and get the remaining Pavement albums on vinyl. I've got this album, their first album, Slanted and Enchanted, and a greatest hits comp called Quarantine the Past. So there's 3 more albums that I need to get. Fantastic band. And then last we have, I guess, a band that was based out of Scotland. Their heyday back from the 80s and some of the 90s, but mainly in the 80s. We have the Cocteau Twins. And this is their compilation called Stars and Topsoil. This was released in the year 2000, but it covers the period of their albums from 1982 to 1990. The album in 1990 being Heaven or Las Vegas, which is one of their more well-known albums. They made 2 albums after this and then disbanded in 1996, but I would say their core period is covered by this. And I think, you know, for those of you that are fans of the Cocteau Twins, you know Elizabeth Fraser's vocals. They're just some of the best female vocals around. And also some wonderful guitar from Robin Guthrie. So this is highly recommended. This is very much, for those that don't know, in sort of a dream pop, ethereal kind of sounding, echoey, maybe even a little shoegazy at times. They had a little bit of a post-punk influence, I would say more in the early days, but this is fantastic stuff. And again, another release that I had previously on CD that I decided to go for the vinyl. Okay guys, thanks a lot for watching, and I'd appreciate any comments. See you later.